Having a bit of a chuckle to myself as I do. That mask is off. Just waiting until somebody pops on. La-di-da-di-da. Hello. What is the time? 10:30. I started consultations at 6 a.m. today, so I've been up for a little while. Good morning. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to talk today. Hi, Kate. It's so nice to see you again. Hi, Laurie. Kel, how are ya? We are going to have a chat about toileting. Sounds creepy, doesn't it? A little bit. I was typing the topic, let's chat about toileting and autism, and I thought, well, doesn't that sound a little on the creepy side, Kristy? Hi, Penny. So good to always see you. Okay, so what I want to start with is talking about, this is such a huge topic. Hi, Dawn. Welcome. So I'm really only going to be able to skim the surface because really we could talk about this for weeks. Laurie's having morning tea break in a childcare service in Brisbane. Oh, Laurie, that used to be me. That was me about 15 years ago, having a 10-minute tea break, always talking far too much, being ridiculous and outdoing my 10 minutes. Enjoy your tea break. You deserve it. So, when we think about autism and toileting, the first thing I want to touch on is that many of us on the autism spectrum, many of us autistic people, we're on our own timeline of development. I prefer to say that than we have a developmental delay. In all honesty though, there is an element of accuracy inside of that when it's compared to typical children. So anytime we say disorder or atypical or delay, we're really saying, well, compared to people that aren't you, this is what you are. And I'm really uncomfortable with that as an autistic person. So if we can just consider autism as an identity and a culture and a different kind of being in the world, I'm a different kind of person, that sounds much nicer, and I'm far more comfortable with that. So if we're looking at autism, toileting is usually something that takes a little bit of time for us to get around. This won't be true for every single autistic person. There are some autistic children that pick it up really quickly, and some of us that take a little longer. There can be such a huge variety of reasons for this, and some of them aren't always taken into consideration. I've made notes today, and I find that so distracting, but I didn't want to forget anything. So one of the first things about toileting is our sensory profile. So there are many sensory systems, and we're learning more and more about that as time goes on. It's important to be really aware of our sensory systems, our sensory processing differences, our sensory profile as autistic people. If you don't know about your child's or your sensory differences or processing, you can access through an occupational therapist or an OT a sensory profile assessment. And it's just a couple of pages that ask some very simple questions like, do you find it difficult to concentrate when there is noise in the background? So there's a range of very basic questions like that, and we go through and answer the questions, and at the end there's a scoring system, and we figure out where we might be super sensitive, where we might be undersensitive, whether we're sensory seeking, sensory defensive, and we can be both, but it gives us a really good idea about where we need to be supported, particularly with toileting. I know as a child, I would put off going to the loo if it was freezing cold. If that seat was cold, if it was winter and that room was cold, I had a really difficult time toileting, and many children do. I specifically, as an autistic person, I am extremely sensitive to cold temperatures. So that will take precedent over anything else to do with my body. I will lose connection and sense of my basic needs if I'm cold. So this is why it's so important to have a really good understanding of our sensory profile. Hi, Dawn. Lissy, hello. Hi, Carmen. Hi, Brittany. West Texas, wowee. Lovely to have you with us. So it's not just cold. It can be the sound of the toilet flushing. There may be fears around that. There may be fears around the texture of toilet paper. Some children have sensory sensitivities that we could never imagine. And this isn't about conscious decisions or choices or being willful or insubordinate or over the top or dramatic. It's about being autistic and having a hypersensitive brain. So taking into account all of the sensory input around toileting and having a really good look at how sensitive our children might be in the entire process from beginning to end. So their clothing, how it feels on their body. Do they feel able to disrobe themselves to get onto the loo? Do they need support doing that? Would they prefer that you actually aren't with them when they're toileting? The thing about, a lot of therapeutic approaches is that we tend to get in this grey area where the word autism exists, and we lose sight of a child's right to basic respect, dignity, and privacy. Just because a child's autistic doesn't mean that, they're okay with being hovered over while they're toileting. If that's what they need, if that's the support they need, then that's fine. But it's important to ask them. And there are a range of ways that we communicate as autistic people, not just verbally, and that's about tuning into body language, sounds our children might be making, whether they're becoming upset, and really paying attention to that. Acceptance that our children are autistic. I know that there might be a great deal of pressure placed on families to be toileting by a certain time. I know that sometimes families are under a great deal of pressure to be ready for school, that they cannot attend a mainstream school or a school environment if they are not independently toileting. And I would say to that forcing a child against their comfort zone, outside of their comfort zone, to be toileting or to be doing anything that their non-autistic peers are doing in order to prepare them for school is something we have to be super careful about, because we can easily push autistic children over that line into trauma. And once we're there, getting them back to try toileting again is no mean feat, let me tell you. It can be really, really difficult. So easy does it, nice and gentle, and making sure that our children are comfortable. If this takes 10 years, then that's okay. When I think about the things I used to panic about as a parent and feel inadequate about, it was because of comparison. And comparison is the absolute thief of joy. And when we're raising autistic or neurodivergent children, and when we are neurodivergent people, comparison really doesn't even belong on our radar. The only thing that we need to worry about is what we're doing, what feels right for us, what's good for our children, and intuitively, what's working in this moment right now. We can also seek the support of occupational therapists, OTs, to help us with some strategies. Some children really thrive with visuals. Little pictures next to the loo of what comes next, what we're doing first, a sequence of events. Some children respond really well to that. Some of us absolutely hate that, especially those of us with a PDA profile, which I'll get to soon. And in saying that, some children with a PDA profile really love visuals too. So there's not one general rule. Some people find that it's helpful to allow their children to have an iPad while they're sitting on the toilet. I think that's fine. Or taking something that they're passionate about, pictures of their favourite things and sticking them on the walls in the loo. It's about being really, really creative and letting them feel comfortable. Sometimes we need to work up to actually sitting on the toilet. Sometimes we might just stand outside the door and then we're done for the day. It's really about what works and what keeps them happy. Sometimes before even building up to even thinking about attempting toileting, we might need a lot of exposure to what a toilet is, what the purpose of a toilet is, what's in it for us, and we can introduce our children to this concept with books, videos, by leaving the door open when we go. It's hard not to laugh about that. I'm trying to be mature. It's just really hard for me sometimes. Okay. So, also paying attention to the changes in our children's toileting. If there are significant changes where they're having a lot of accidents or wetting the bed at night or really resistant to use the loo after some time of using it without a problem, then it's really important to tune into what may have been going on in their environment. Has something happened at school that's frightened them? Is there some form of potential trauma? Is there some that usually it means that there's something going on that we're not aware of, and it's important to look outside of the actual act of toileting to see what's going on there. Because a child's sleep and their toileting routine are the first things that will be disrupted when something's bothering them or disturbing them. I'm just looking at my notes. I knew they'd be distracting. This is why I just wing it most of the time, but this is a really important topic. Stress, panic and desperation. Now, these are difficult things to reel in as parents. Sometimes even our excitement can be received by our children's brains as threat and scary and overwhelming. So it can be really hard for us, but really sussing out whether something's a little bit overwhelming for them in terms of, you know, if they use the toilet, and sometimes we get really excited and go, yes, well done. Sometimes that can be scary for our kids. So trying to keep it cool as much as possible, and also remembering that autistic people, we feel into the energies of other people. We are very switched on to what's going for others on an emotional level. We can feel it. It doesn't matter whether we're speaking or not. It doesn't matter how significant our support needs are. That stuff is irrelevant. We all feel into the intentions and motivations of others. And if we as parents are carrying a lot of stress and anxiety around toileting, that's the first thing our children are going to pick up on. And it may create a barrier for them to feel comfortable in doing that. Hi, Tammy. Kel says, maybe that's why mine have no issues with the toilet. I never get to go by myself still. But then they complain when I need to do it. Yeah. That's all I've got to say. Yeah. Okay. Again, using our own intuition and not responding to the timeline of other people. So not feeling, I don't want to use the word bullied, but not feeling pressured by our therapists or our support teams or educators or family members or friends or even partners around, let's hurry this up and make sure that they're a functioning person. We need to let that go. We need to completely let that go. Again, autistic people, we're on our own timeline. We're on our own timeline here. Thinking about interoception. So interoception is one of our sensory systems. Now, I've already touched a little bit on paying attention to our sensory systems. Interoception is what's going on inside of our bodies. And dependent on sometimes our particular neurodivergence, we can be somewhat disconnected from our interoceptive processes. So some of us will not know when it's time to eat because we just won't feel hungry. Some of us will not know when we're thirsty because we won't experience that sensation to the point where we dehydrate ourselves and we're starving and we get dizzy and nauseous and pass out. And in the same capacity, we may not know when we need to go to the loo. So we may have accidents, we may not quite make it, and we may not understand that it's time to dash off to the bathroom until we're absolutely desperate and in a lot of pain. And sometimes we can feel that pain and we can say to our parents, oh, I've got a pain in my tummy, it's really sore, and still not get that it's because we need to go to the bathroom. So, hi Rachel, really nice to see you. Hi Scout, hi Sarah. There are a range of ways that we can help our children tune into their bodies, and I'll touch on that in a little bit. So, again, touching on our right to privacy as autistic people. So when we're children, I do see this a lot, and I've seen this a lot for many, many years, even before I knew I was autistic, even before I had my own autistic children. The privacy and our children's basic rights to dignity and respect, privacy taken away just because the word autism is in there. We don't need to jump in and panic and fix and change our children to the point of not actually recognizing them as human beings with their own thoughts, feelings, and experiences. And I particularly see this when our children are non-speaking and have higher support needs. Often the information that families will be given is that their children may be intellectually disabled, and that right there is problematic because we don't actually know that for sure, especially considering that the standard testing to ascertain cognitive scoring, a large component of it is language-based. And if our children are non-speaking and they cannot meet that requirement, then they're going to end up with a diagnosis of intellectual disability. So many families come away from being told that their children don't know what's going on, that they don't understand much. And because they might move their bodies in ways that we're unfamiliar with, or make sounds that we're unfamiliar with until we have our children, we might actually buy into that. We might actually think, well, they're so different, this must be true. I want to encourage you to always assume competence and intelligence, always. The amount of non-speaking autistic people that eventually find a way of communicating and tell these horrific stories about being exposed to their families, speaking about them in their presence, about their challenges and their disability. And, this happens inside of families. So it's something to be really aware of and really conscious of. So always speaking to our children with respect and dignity and respecting their right to privacy. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about PDA. PDA. Toileting is a demand for many PDAs. In case you've not heard of PDA before, it's pathological demand avoidance. And the research reflects at the moment that PDA is a subtype or a behavioural profile of autism. So it is autism with some differences. So demand avoidance and extreme anxiety. And what we term as demands are not the usual basic things like go and do this. Demands are any kind of pressure or expectations placed on a person or implied. So we can even, this is me, I'll be working away at the computer and I will feel the urge to use a bathroom and I will feel annoyed about it. And I'll actually say to my body, nah, not doing it, gonna get this finished. And I'll just keep looking at the computer, typing away, and I can be in pain. I can go a whole day and be in horrific pain, but that PDA brain goes, resistance, not doing it. So the interesting thing about many of our children with a PDA profile is that some of them will toilet earlier, and some of our children will be toileted during the day but might need incontinence support during nights for some time, and that's okay. So they may need to be wearing a pull-up to bed for a little bit longer, and that's totally okay. It's totally okay. There's no right or wrong around toileting. We just do what's working for us in that moment and we ease the pressure. We take the pressure off. Also, for people with a PDA profile, we have heightened sensory sensitivities because our brain is largely overactive in its threat response most of the time, which means if I'm feeling extremely anxious, then my whole central nervous system is going to be on alert all of the time, which means that I'm going to be super sensitive and hypervigilant to sounds like that dog next door, the birds outside, the cars on the road, my children inside, to the point where it can completely overwhelm us and cause us to be explosive or have a meltdown, and it can just happen like that. We can be okay 1 second and then the next hands are over the ears and we're having a meltdown. Now, because of this heightened sensory sensitivity for many of us, just reflecting back to what I was originally saying about, I'm very distracted by that dog. I'm so sorry. I'm trying so hard to stay on track. About really tuning into our children's sensory profile around toileting. Is it cold in there? Is the seat too cold? Are their feet freezing on the floor? Because that will shut down our ability to cognitively process any other instructions or routines when sensory sensitivities are peaked. So remembering with PDA children, or children with a PDA profile, or PDAers, I refer to myself as a PDAer, our sensory systems are at peak. Now, a lot of people ask about, now I'm going to touch on fecal smearing, and if this is too much for you, this is your trigger warning. If it's something that you're not comfortable to hear about, then I would encourage you to do what you need to do. Exit the chat or whatever's comfortable for you. I'll just give people another couple of seconds to make that decision, because this is a really important part of toileting for many autistic people, and I think it is not addressed enough, and a lot of assumptions are made about it, and I see a lot of approaches that are very damaging and traumatic for our children. Okay, I'm going to start talking about fecal smearing in 3, 2, 1. Fecal smearing is something that our children can engage in for a range of reasons. Some of them have got nothing to do with toileting. Sometimes our children will engage in fecal smearing because they are bored, because they are craving sensory input. It may be because it's always meeting an unmet need. Any kind of behaviour our children engage in is because they are meeting a need that is unmet. So sometimes songs shuffled. Siri just scared the crap out of me. How dare you? No, music! How dare she? How rude. So sometimes autistic children will engage in fecal smearing in order to get their parents into their bedroom at night time because they're seeking connection, but they may be non-speaking. So this may be the only form of communication that they have. They might know that this is a way of getting a response. Another reason that children may fecal smear is because of their diet. There may be food intolerances, there may be something going on that causes them to feel like they need to engage with the removal themselves. Also, when we have children who are non-speaking or have communication barriers, then what might happen is, rather than being able to communicate to us that they have a soiled pair of pull-ups or pants, or they need changing, or they need help in any way, they'll try and take care of it themselves. So that can happen as well. It can also be an indication that a child is unwell or moving into becoming unwell. If it's not something that happens a lot and all of a sudden it's happening, there may be something going on outside of this behaviour. In the same way that I was talking about toileting and sleeping being disturbed, those can be really important communications to look at the rest of their daily routine, their school environment. There may be something going on that's disturbing them or bothering them. And some other reasons are, some people who are autistic have bodies that do not meet the intention of their mind. And this can be extremely frustrating, particularly when, as human beings, we judge purely the outer expression of human beings, that is their behaviour. And we don't have insight into what's going on internally, neurologically. We're basing what we believe to be the truth about why they're doing something on how it looks to us. We're comparing it to our own behaviour, basically, or non-autistic behaviour. Sometimes there are autistic people who, like I said, when their bodies do not meet the intention of their mind, there may be a sensory disconnect. So they may be largely driven to engage with sensory seeking behaviours or activities that are dangerous and unsafe. Examples of this are when autistic children run onto roads in front of cars, when we put our hands into fire, when we put our hands into pots of boiling water. This is because there is the body's desperate need to engage with the sensory experience. And there isn't enough time for the threat response to kick in and to prevent that behaviour from happening. So it's important to understand that this can happen with fecal smearing as well. There are autistic people, young autistic people, who are able to communicate in different ways that I've actually read their pieces where they've communicated that they are 100% intelligent and understand what's happening, but they're unable to prevent themselves from engaging with that activity in the moment because their body will not stop. And so this is when sometimes we might see our children engaging in self-harm. They might start hitting themselves or banging their heads on the floor or engaging in something that is extremely violent because they're trying to stop their bodies from engaging in something that they know is not something they want to be doing. So it's so important for us to have compassion and empathy and to suspend our disbelief. To, you know, when we go into parenting autistic children, it's really important to come at it with such a completely open mind, letting go of everything we think we know about parenting and being open to a new experience. Letting go of everything we think we know about being human and being willing to have a new experience. Does anybody have any questions before I go? I'm supposed to be making a phone call right now. There's my ADHD popping up there. One way our son let us know he was ready to begin toileting was he woke up holding his faeces, then ran to the toilet and dropped it in. We praised him for being so smart and knowing where the poo goes. It's a work in progress, but we are so proud of how far he's come in this area. That is a fantastic example, Pamela. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And I really appreciate people being sensitive and respectful about this conversation. And if there are any other autistic people in the conversation, I'd always encourage you to join and share your own experience or any input, because this is really important. I can only speak for myself. Scout says, random question about sleepwalking toileting. Is this something you hear about from autistic? Yeah. Sleepwalking. Yeah, I don't have any scientific data to back that up, but it does seem to be really common. Also night terrors. And I think this may have something to do with having an overactive brain and the way that we process information very differently. So even, this is why we have such a hard time sleeping, because the brain never stops. All that information in there, trying to make sense of it. Yeah, definitely something I've heard of before. Thank you everyone for being here. I think I might need to do a part two with some approaches to help our children, because we're not just going to talk about our challenges and leave it there. I'd like to be able to discuss some of the really supportive approaches that we can implement in toileting. Bye bye. Have a wonderful day.